What if I told you that by fixing your pacing, you could take your attention graphs from looking like this to this? That's why I'm going to walk you through exactly how the highest level creators think about pacing and what you can start doing differently to keep your audience on board. And you might be thinking, well, who am I to tell you? Well, I've worked with channels with over 1 million subscribers on YouTube and I've helped generate over 5 million views. So, yeah. So you might be thinking, well, what does pacing even mean? So, first off, pacing is a combination of the pacing of the cuts, so how fast you're cutting or how slow, the beats per minute of the music track you're using, and also just the general pacing of the dialogue, say you're editing a vlog. So, if you take, for example, a slower pacing, you would think of, cuts between maybe 5 to 10 seconds, which is pretty damn slow considering how people edit on YouTube nowadays. Uh, Music that has beats per minute on the lower end, and then slower dialogue, so someone talking more slowly. Now that you understand the basic concept, how can you use that to extract more of your audience's attention? Well, first off, you should think of pacing in terms of waves. So you should be constantly either creating tension or releasing tension. And if you don't do that, and you just don't take it into account, you'll find that your videos feel completely flat because, well, you haven't taken into account any kind of dynamic feel. Take a Hollywood film, for example. Do you ever see them edit an action-packed film, an action movie, and you're watching it and it's fast-paced through the entire thing? No, of course not. I mean, how the hell would you be able to keep up with that? They always build up to the action-packed moments and then release. And you might be thinking, well, yeah, they need to have slower parts because obviously they need to include the storyline and the plot and the information about the character. Yeah, that's true. But I think one of the most underrated parts of those moments is that it slows everything down and allows the audience to take in all the information. So really, as an editor or creator, you need to ask yourself, do I really need to cram in as many sounds and visual effects as possible into these videos? When these film editors, they're editing a film that's 3 hours long and they can maintain the audience's attention from start to finish. So you gotta think, well, can I at least reduce the amount of animations and graphics I'm using? Because it's taking up all this effort, and clearly the psychology behind editing means that you don't need these things as much as you think you do. And actually, if you overdo it, you're not just missing out on satisfying the audience, you're actively making them want to click off the video. And there's one really important concept that you need to be aware of in order to make sure this doesn't happen. Visual continuity. If you think about how our attention works in the real world, how do we follow along with something visually? We use our eyes, right? And you think about, if we're watching a plane moving through the sky, or even just reading a book, we have to have our eyes in harmony with the words on the book. Otherwise, how are you going to absorb any of the information? And in terms of the editing perspective, you also need to keep this in mind, because if you haven't got everything flowing seamlessly from one clip to the next, then how do you expect your audience to pay any attention to it? Because you can't read the book with your eyes not on the words properly, right? Or, if you try to, say, read a book and the words were scattered all over the page, think of how difficult that would be. No, it's one line, and then the next one, and then the next one. It's a seamless flow. So, for example, the direction of the camera movement should all be moving in one direction. So, say now you have one clip that's like a slow pan towards the right, and you just think, right, well, for the next one, I'll also include a clip that's slow pan into the right. because all the movement of the camera is going in the same direction, and therefore the eyes are following along with that movement, and they don't have to suddenly go from right and then suddenly goes left, and then there's camera movement that's going up and then it's going down. It's just one seamless flow, right? And the same goes for graphics as well. If you've, say, got a talking head video and you want to include a graphic on the screen, say near the subject's head, then you can motion track it to their head so that it follows the same movement, because when you're watching a talking head video, you're of course going to be naturally following their face or eyes. So putting the graphic there to where it's following the same movement just allows you to basically not have to divert your attention, and you maintain that attention because that's where your eyes are naturally going to look. Then not only do you need to have all of the movement aligned, but you also need to set up the clips in a very particular way, otherwise it just won't be as effective. So, like I just mentioned with the talking head example, and the importance of following the movement of the face and the eyes, when you have the talking head video as an example, say now the viewer is obviously focusing on their face, right? If you're obviously cut to the A-roll. So then when you, say, cut to a bit of B-roll that's showing, say, a product, then the viewer's eyes are still going to be exactly where the person's face was. That's where it would have been originally. And then when you cut to the next clip, they have a split second where their eyes need to adjust to the new visuals on screen, right? So once you do that, you want to make sure that the new point of focus is exactly where the person's face was, because then you make it so the viewer doesn't need to do as much work, as opposed to if say, there's a person talking and their face is in the center, and then you cut to a new clip, and then there's a product that they need to be focusing on, but it's in the top right, then for that moment they need to like move their eyes, and then that just creates a lot more effort for them, compared to if you just cut to the next clip and it's perfectly centered already for them. And you think about, you know, how people edit nowadays with retention editing and how fast they edit. You think about if you don't take that into account with fast editing, you can imagine every time you cut in the video, the viewer is like this. I mean, how on earth are they going to focus on your video and actually absorb anything, as opposed to slowing down the cuts, because most people are cutting way too fast, and then just keeping everything in a nice smooth direction and keeping it all centered. Then when the time comes when you actually want to refocus the viewer's eyes or divert their attention, that's when you change the direction or change the visuals up. Whether that's moving the visual to a different place on the screen, or just creating something that's purposefully jolting, because now you're editing with actual purpose. And those changes are vital, because that's when you're finally able to release tension for the viewer. Because if you don't leave in any of those parts, everything you've built up to this point in time is pointless, because if there's a build-up, then there has to be a point where you enjoy it, right? If it's just build up, build up, build up, you build up, and then you get to the end of the video, and the viewer's just like, well, what just happened? So, how do you know when to finally break that attention and enter a new phase of the video? Well, that all depends on how you want the viewer to feel in that moment. And you can think of it in terms of like mini rewards sprinkled throughout the video, and then one big reward at the end, right? So during the video, you'll always have moments you can build up to, and then you want to wind down, and that just creates a smooth dynamic throughout, right? And a reward, you could say a mini reward, is something like, if you're doing a product review edit, it could be a really interesting part of, say, a keyboard that you know the viewer's going to be pretty interested in, although it's not the main point of the video, you know it's going to grab their attention a lot. So then you build up to that, and then you slow it down and let them enjoy this moment. Or you could think of a fitness creator as an example, where they're trying out a really polarizing workout routine, and the viewer is really keen to hear their thoughts on it. So that build up to where they're about to give their opinion on it and summarize the workout, you know, that's a point where you can build up and then slow it all down once they finally give their opinion. And that change in pacing is what really locks in the viewer's mind onto that moment, as opposed to keeping the pacing the same throughout. It's just that sudden change and contrast that really grabs their attention. If you're able to apply this correctly, then your retention graphs will look much more like a straight line rather than a ski slope. And on that note, if you're interested in working with me, I do have space for just one more creator to work with at the moment, which I of course can't guarantee. So if you're interested in working with me, then check the link in the description.